Do you remember the 2017 Tom Cruise film, The Mummy? Neither does anyone else, but it was supposed to kick off the Dark Universe, Universal's answer to the MCU using their classic movie monsters instead of superheroes.
The film bombed so bad they canceled the whole franchise. But our podcast asked the question, what if they hadn't?
On every episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, one of us pitches the other on the next film in the saga, complete with casting. If you're gonna hit an invisible man in the balls, you want it to be John C. Reilly.
Yes. Full plot summary. He grows, bursting out of his clothes and twisting into a new shape, that of an enormous, ferocious wolf.
And sometimes even a full cast table read.
Another trick of yours, Count?
No tricks here, boy. I have lived too long to play any more games.
Plus, we have tons of cool guests who pitch us their own remakes of classic horror movies. So find us on your favorite podcast app and ask yourself the question,
Are you afraid of the Dark Universe?
Greetings and welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast. I'm your host, Don Cardenas, and today I am very pleased to have two amazing guests today. They are the hosts of probably my favorite current podcast going right now. Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dylan Roth, Dalton Deschain. Welcome to the show.
That's too kind, Don. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Well, ever since you both announced it, like I remember the Frankenstein episode. You know, it helped me clean out my garage. It was
good.
It made that task a lot easier.
Well, that's why our episodes now are pushing past 2 hours, because we know people have lots of chores to do, and we want to make sure we soundtrack the entire chore and that you don't run out of podcast too soon.
When I was working full time at an office job, like I listened to probably a dozen different podcasts throughout the week.
Yeah.
But now that I don't, I find that the podcasts I do listen to, I just want them to be longer.
Well, we live to serve.
So whenever you're both like, oh, this one's going to be really long, I'm like, yeah.
Well, that's what we found out. Like when we first started the podcast, we worked really hard to not make them longer than an hour. We were like, we don't want to waste people's time. We want to make things short. But then like all the feedback we've gotten is like people like the longer episodes, and we've gotten more indulgent with the storytelling and everything. Yeah. So they're now like pushing past 2 hours a little bit, but we also only release them every 2 weeks. So it's not like you have to. You're not going to get a huge backlog if you listen to it over time.
It's actually shocking when people get in touch with us and tell us just how fast they burn through the first two seasons of the show. Like someone will be like, oh, I started listening to it over the weekend and I just got up to, the Phantom of the Phantom. I'm like, what the?
That's like 35 hours of podcasts you listen to. Like it must be like office job stuff or long commutes, all that.
I'm sure. I've done that to podcasts before, for sure.
I suppose, people will binge 10 episodes of a TV show, but this they can do while they're at work.
Or looking at their phone. And people love doing stuff while looking at phone.
They sure do.
Well, I've long said that when it comes to podcasts and even it's more referencing when I'm in terms of editing, how I don't try to edit too much, because if there's like a 1 or 2 second pause, no one's really going to notice.
Yeah.
Because no one's sitting down this like almost, pour a nice, glass of whiskey and sit next to a fire and listen to my favorite podcast. No one's doing that. You're doing other things. So those little things that, we as the people making it would obsess about, like, oh man, they're going to be really bothered by this here. I said too many times or whatever. Unless it's like really distracting and it's like constantly every other word, it's fine. No one's going to care. No one's going to notice. And I've done having 100, this is my 124th episode of the show.
Ooh, congrats.
Having done this many, I've tried so many different, like, does a half-hour episode work more with people? Does this? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
As long as the content's good.
Yeah, it all comes down to who am I talking to? What are we talking about? And that's it.
Yeah. When I first started editing podcasts, I was really precious, like about all the silences, like cutting out any silence, like longer than a second, and cutting out, any pause or stuttering that I'm doing right now, and then the longer I do it, the more I'm just like, no, it just sounds so much better when it's natural. And, we the thing about our podcast though, is that we're doing a lot of reading of scripts and things like that. And and we want to keep the flow of the story going. So we will, like, if we flub a line, if we mispronounce something, I'll cut that stuff out because I want the pacing of the story to still work. But I try to keep it as natural as possible.
Right, because you don't want, if you're listening to an audiobook, you don't want the narrator filling in the their filler words, right?
Exactly.
And that's kind of the trouble where, like, our show is like 50% us talking about a movie that we've made up, and then 50% reading the script that one of us has written for the movie that we made up. And like that part, like that's where like I add soundtrack, and where Dalton really has to tighten up all of my verbal flubs. I would say probably the other thing that's hard about the show getting longer is that Dalton edits the main podcast, and that's a chore because we can't stop. We have to stop giving ourselves more work for the show.
You have to stop in particular. I'm fine with the work level that we're at.
I have not so far, apart from like one thing that I think I've already told you about, I have not added any new chores for us this season.
Okay, but literally like right before our last episode, you texted me and were like, hey, what if we got some like other people to come in and record all the different parts of it? And I was like, no,
I wanted to add
editing.
I wanted to add one more voice so that we could have a third, because I was writing all of these scenes of dialogue that involved more than two people. I'm like, this could be really confusing if it's just our two voices.
Don,
what if I brought in a friend and Dalton had to nip that right in the butt? But that's important.
No. You know, Dalton, I want to sympathize with you, but I also have those tendencies to just like, I can do 10% more and it'll feel like it's 50% better. Yes, let's do that. And then I like, where do I have the time for this?
Yeah.
You know, and so I understand both sides 100%.
I fully understand the impulse. It has taken me a lot of many years of learning where my capabilities end, and now I got to be like, this is where I draw the line.
Yeah, an internal conversation between Dalton and the Alfred in their head, being like,
yes,
like everyone has limits. Master Deschain. Can't afford to know them.
Oh yeah. My problem is like, even though when I hit my limits, I'm like, but maybe this is just me needing to push it a little bit more, and then I get burnt out, and then I do nothing.
Well, we're always pushing.
I can't afford to do nothing, but you just end up slogging through something you don't need to be slogging through, and then eventually you get the spark back. But yeah, it's the Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe? I've explained what the show is before we started talking, so don't worry. So anyone who's not aware of,
I don't have to go through the full pitch.
Or you two, I've given the spiel for you. Don't worry.
Thank you.
But the amount of work you both put in there it's completely evident. But the biggest thing is the passion you both have for storytelling and for wanting to create these stories. And when Dalton announced doing the hypothetical, because I think we've broken the kayfabe on it, right? We don't have
the writer's strike made it impossible for us to continue to pretend that we were secretly hired by Universal, and it's probably a good idea for us to lift the veil anyway.
Yeah, and I was simultaneously like, wow, this could be really cool, and also kicking myself because I not that I probably be alone in saying it's like, but I had like a similar idea of like doing something with the DCU, like starting with Man of Steel, and then going still can. There. My whole thing was like, I was going to do it back when I had a Patreon. I was basically going to be drawing the character I'm talking about, and then talking about the what I would have done for that or whatever.
Hell yeah!
It would be like a process video
where this is so much work, man. This is so much work because it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and I just like, nah, I can't. And then you crazy folks did it, and you keep building on it, and it's amazing. I was trying to think, what was my favorite episode? Like,
it's hard. Know.
It's hard not to say The Invisible Man. It's hard not to say.
I appreciate that. Although we've discovered recently some listeners that don't like that episode, that it's one of their least favorite episodes.
Yeah. What's been kind of nice is like for our Patreon, we have a Discord where we get to like hear from people who listen to the show and like talk to each other about it, which is probably the most gratifying thing in the world, which is to be allowed to be in the room while people who really love your work argue about it. Honestly, that's what it's all been for. 4 years of writing school, a decade of gigging. Nothing. It's all worth it now.
Started from the bottom.
Yeah, but it's but yeah, apparently there are a couple of episodes that are like the particularly popular ones, but like everyone seems to be somebody's favorite and someone's least favorite.
Yeah, it's a pretty good spread. But I am curious. Yeah. So, what are if it's not Invisible Man, what's like top three? What are some of your favorites?
Well, Invisible Man's definitely, I don't know if I can pick one like to be the top one, but Invisible Man definitely top three. I want to say the Frankenstein opener. I think just because it hooked me in so well, and it was just this is. Like, because I didn't know what to expect from the show. I Dalton, I knew you beforehand. I knew you were a fantastic writer. I'm like, what is this going to be? And then I'm like, wow, this is like really good. Like, so much so that I'm like, if Dalton wants to pitch this as a comic, like, I'll be angry if he doesn't call me first. Like, it's one of these things.
Let's talk, because that Frankenstein pitch is, as far as screenplays goes, DOA, but we could put something together as a comic.
And Dalton has developed that script much further from what they said on the show. Yeah. So it's,
I'm glad that we ended up. We really lucked out with that, because the tough thing with a podcast, especially a narrative podcast like this, you have to hook people from the beginning. And the first step is really just us talking about The Mummy 2017, right? Which can lose some people, especially there are fans of that movie, believe it or not, and they have listened to the show.
Love the way we talk about it.
They're in our Discord. They like that movie, and we're pretty harsh on it in the first episode. But I think, like you, like a lot of people go in. I mean, we recently had Joseph Fink from Welcome to Night Vale was tweeting about it, and how like he went into it being like, oh, this is gonna like make fun of cinematic universes, or like kind of poke fun of and we do a little bit, but mostly we take it very seriously, and we're just like, all right, how would we make this good? How would we make this something we want to see? And I think people don't expect that, and Frankenstein is such a serious horror pitch, and so disconnected from The Mummy 2017, that it seems to have worked with like hooking people in, and then following it up with The Wolfman, which is the opposite of that. I think like those sort of first three episodes are a pretty good, even though like I'm sure we look back and they seem rudimentary by the standards of the episodes we're writing now. I think they're a great hook for people, which a lot of podcasts take a long time to find their footing, and I'm glad we sort of have our hooks in with people right from the beginning.
And to pick one more, because it's hard for me to pick, because I really liked Dracula Lives. I really liked Dylan, the format you had for it. But I surprisingly to me, because I don't like musicals. I'm a fan of the opera. Like, I'll be honest. I'll be 100% with you both right now. It took me a while to actually go listen to it. Once I heard it was I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, not a musical person.
And then I gave it a shot, and I'm like, bitch, it's really good.
Musical podcasts are very different from regular musicals, I think.
And while the music was definitely good and it was very entertaining, like the story itself, I was like, oh man, this is really good. And so I was definitely intrigued from the beginning. It's just the musical aspect of it was like, but you made a convert out of me. So now that I'm looking forward to the next one. The next musical episode.
It's Dalton's turn now,
and now Don just loves musicals. You're watching Hello Dolly. You're out there. You're getting Rodgers and Hammersteined up.
Well,
no, probably not. But
like, it surprises me to hear, like, whenever I hear that like a metalhead isn't into musical theater, because they have so much in common in terms of like theatricality and like narrative. Obviously, metal comes in 82 different flavors, right?
Which brings me to a very important question, Don. I don't know if you've addressed this on the podcast before, but I think this is vital for the fans if you haven't. How do you feel about Meatloaf?
Meatloaf?
Yeah.
I mean, questionable politics towards the end of his life
Sure,
aside.
not the person, but like Bat Out of Hell. How do you feel about Bat Out of Hell?
Him and Jim Steinman, I mean, you can't deny how well they worked together.
That's probably like is that the perfect intersection? Because I know it's obviously not metal, like metal, but it's the aesthetics of metal.
Do like a rock musical type thing. Meatloaf, I think Meatloaf would work for it.
Dead center of that Venn diagram.
Would be my mental place where I'm like, okay, if it sounds like this, I'm probably in.
They did Bat Out of Hell on Broadway a few years ago, and I'm so mad I missed it. I would love to see they like staged it somehow.
Well, I want to see the musical that Jim Steinman wrote Total Eclipse of the Heart for, which is about vampires, and I think it like did not debut in the States. I think it was done in Europe.
You know what we have to do once we finish the Dark Universe? We have to do the same thing, but for a Jim Steinman universe of all musicals that are interconnected, starting with Bat Out of Hell. That's our Mummy 2017. And then we follow it up with the Total Eclipse of the Heart musical and go from there.
Yeah, what we need to do is get involved in another very litigious industry.
Yes.
Butt heads more with that.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not poo-pooing musical. Like, I totally respect the art form of it and all that. And as a guy who loves metal, who loves all types of metal, like, so, you know, I love like Nightwish and stuff like that. And you can't tell me that's not musical theater, you know, or at least damn near close to it at some point. But yeah, it's just the general aspect, because I've seen a few, like, you know, musicals in my day when we were younger. We'd go to like some colleges putting on some musicals and stuff like that, and they were entertaining and all that. It just wasn't my thing, my go-to and all that. I think I've been burned a lot by like, and I know it's not the same thing, but like TV shows having the musical episode, and it's just like, come on, you know. But again, you know, I trusted you both. I just needed a minute to remind myself of that, and I was so glad I did. So, but yeah, it's like I was scrolling through, seeing like, okay, what are my favorite episodes? And like, I like them all. Like, I can, you know, maybe some more than others, obviously, but like, I can think about each episode and like, there's something I liked about each of them a lot. And
that's good to hear.
And and it's fun to hear you two talk about, like, give each other notes on it and all that. And when I disagree, like, no, don't change that. No, that was good. You know, like, and things like that. And but I think that's part of the fun for everybody else listening to it, is like we're in the room with you two, and we're also, you know, wanting to give our notes, or at least stop anything from changing from what we actually liked. Yeah. Because, you know, I do have to mention, you know, the creature from the Black Lagoon is my favorite Universal monster.
Ooh, yeah.
And
I think well, the first time we met, that was Man Thing. But I bought a Man Thing from you when we first met at C2E2. But you know, related. Yeah,
swampy lagoony type thing. I actually have to do a creature commission for my Kickstarter. For one of my backers, but
well, that's cool.
But when you announced you're doing, you know, the Black Lagoon, I'm like, oh man, you know, that was the first time I was actually nervous. Like, I hope I don't not like this.
Yeah,
not the case.
A lot of pressure.
I loved it. I thought it was great. I liked the take of it, for sure. Especially, you know, when it was incorporated into the second crossover movie, and you know, the creature got some action.
Yes.
Some stuff. I was really looking forward to that. But again, like, it's I constantly recommend this podcast to everybody, even when like if I'm watching something on YouTube and someone mentions like The Mummy or something, I'll be in the comments like, hey, you guys should check out this.
We appreciate that. That word of mouth is important.
And I'm super excited to see like the success it's been getting, and how the community behind it's growing and all that. And, you know, wanting to acknowledge just, again, how much work you both put into it. And Dylan, with the soundtrack stuff, I think that's a very unsung part of the shows, is having that soundtrack under there. It's such a key part. I think that people will definitely miss it if it's not there, but they're not but it's that thing that fits perfectly where it's like it just creates so much more of a bedrock for everything to sit on. And do you typically write? You know, we kind of mentioned before the show you're not a huge gear guy. What do you typically compose with and write with?
So I'll be sitting here at this desk. This is actually a composer desk where there's a drawer, like kind of like a keyboard drawer, where I've got a MIDI keyboard. And I'll just be working directly into Logic with mostly the out of the box available MIDI tools, much to Dalton's chagrin.
Eventually, once the pod takes off, once the Patreon takes off, we're gonna get you the Native Instruments complete set.
I mean, I would love that. There was a period of time where I was going to try and do more freelance scoring, where I was like going to try and subscribe to like the heavy duty shit. But I realized very quickly that I was in over my head, and I would need to get more formal training. But for the show, I do a lot of it sort of Carpenter style, where like I'll listen to a passage and I'll just start kind of laying down some layers.
John Carpenter, not like woodwork.
Well, no, or like
a
like Mary Chapin Carpenter or whatever. I don't know how she got down, but it's where I'm like I don't have a lot of time, right? I usually have no more than maybe 2 weeks.
No, you usually have a week, and you're going to have less for The Mummy 3. Sorry.
Right. The longer the episode is, the longer it takes Dalton to edit, which means the less time I have to score it, but it's also longer and it needs more music.
Yes.
And I initially convinced myself that I could do this by like, I'll create a library of music. And so every subsequent episode, I'll have to write less music because I'll have this whole library. And then I quickly found myself
the happy cue.
Yeah. It was unacceptable to me. I could not make them fit properly. I just realized, no, if I want to do this right, I have to compose to the track every time.
I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah. And like, I'm like, I'm a score nerd. It's one of the 8 million things, like growing up being like, oh yeah, I want to be Danny Elfman. I want another thing that Dalton and I have in common.
That's why I studied composition.
Yeah, but I didn't. And so I come in with very much, a very DIY process for it but I also I couldn't have time to write it out properly, right? There's just turnaround time's way too fast. So I do a lot with, even as somebody who I often lament that film scoring has become so much more part of sound design, and it's much less thematic and not a lot of stuff that you leave whistling on your way out of the theater. But I've written 2 leitmotifs for characters so far, and we've been doing this for a year and a half. So I get it now. It's hard. And especially in a medium where it's all audio, I can't do anything too distracting because you got to be listening to the narration and the dialogue. I'm never scoring over just visual action. So, but yeah, it's just me and my keyboard and Logic, laying down first, some sort of atmospheric, some kind of pad, putting together, like sort of a chord progression. And then I love to throw a Celeste on there. I like to make things jingle and jangle, but for the most part, and I try to give each style of movie kind of a different palette. I never get asked to talk about it, so thank you. But yeah, it's the kind of thing where it was a late edition. We didn't plan to do necessarily score until I was listening to the first cut of Frankenstein, and I'm thinking, this could really use some atmosphere. And then created hundreds of hours of work for myself.
Yeah. No, I totally get it, and I love talking about this stuff. Dalton knows. I will talk about all the nerdy gear stuff, plugins, all that stuff. I have way too many plugins. Yet somehow keep looking at more. The fun thing about technology now is you can kind of, not to say you do this, but you can kind of dumb your way into something that sounds pretty good.
Oh, I 100% do that.
And the idea you brought up, the library of things, man, I'm currently working on an EP of metal songs with my buddy Kevin Mellon, who's a fantastic songwriter and musician in his own right. And for about six or 7 years, I did this thing called Rifftober, where every day I did a new riff every single day. And
I remember you doing Rifftober.
While if I look back throughout the years, I can see like, okay, I kind of like just did this riff again, but like changed something at the end, or, this year or whatever, because you're not really thinking about it. But I kind of did that. I'm like, oh, I have this library of riffs. I can pull stuff. I can start making some songs. And then I'm like, it's just when you start to get down to the nitty gritty to making the song, you're like, this doesn't work. This riff's too busy for anyone to do a vocal over. Like, and it's just like, oh God. So, and he had picked a
maybe it's not a single with vocals. Maybe it's a Sonic the Hedgehog stage, man.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, if I could play some Sonic the Hedgehog music on my guitar, my kids would fucking flip. So my buddy Kevin, he picked out a bunch of the Rifftober days. He's like, oh, let's make these into songs. So now I'm in the process of like, all right, I have 2 riffs. Usually I said 1 riff, but it's usually 2 riffs. Because you can never do 1. And so it's like expanding it and doing all that. So I'm like, I'm feeling what you're saying right now. It's like I had this stuff and I'm trying to expand. And it's like it's just not right. So it just ends up being more work than you thought it was going to be. But in the end, it'll be worth it. And I'm, again, I really do think the soundtrack stuff is a key element to what makes the podcast so good and sets it apart from something else that might be, doing this kind of fun narrative stuff.
Well, thank you. I always think it's important for us to go one step beyond what's reasonable to do.
Well, as creative people, I mean, that's our MO, right?
Yep.
We did kind of get we started talking about the show beforehand, so I'm going to backtrack a bit and I'm going to say, Comics, Coffee, Metal, what are you both digging right now? Well, we can start with Dalton. I think Dalton has some coffee and metal news for us.
I have some. I've been saving some big news just for you, Don.
Nice.
I'm gonna start on the metal front. In my last appearance on here, we talked about I don't listen to a ton of metal, although I think we talked about Zeal and Ardor. I think, and I have been listening to some Deaf Heaven lately, but the news that I have to announce, how tangential is System of a Down to metal?
They're metal.
I would say so, right?
That's where we filed them vintage vinyl.
Yeah.
I want to announce here first. It's a little early for me to be making announcements like this, but I will be doing Chop Suey for the B69s this year.
Nice.
I have already recorded it. I finished it today. I was inspired because there's this Instagram reel that went viral that I saw of someone doing Rock Lobster in the style of System of a Down. And I was like, well, fuck, I need to do the opposite of this and do Chop Suey in the style of the B-52s. So it is the most atrocious thing I have ever created. I sent it to a few people and everyone was furious with me. It sounds like hell. Not like that it's bad, but just the two, like System of a Down writes in like modes that the B-52s have never gotten close to. And so just like, even though everything fits, like harmonically, it just sounds wrong. I've like last year I did, Santana's Smooth, and that was sort of the big breakout, but those two fit together like surprisingly well.
Mm-hmm.
This is one where they don't gel at all. But I think it works. So stay tuned in December. Chop Suey will be making an appearance on the B69's EP.
An early Christmas present for us all.
There you go. I won't reveal what else will be on the EP, but I'll give you that since it's on topic. Coffee-wise, I feel like last time I was on here, I was still on decaf. Mm-hmm. I have fallen off the wagon. I am back on caffeine. I think we talked about my Nespresso at the time that I had the new Nespresso. Yes. I couldn't just be having the same decaf over and over. They have so many cool flavors that I wanted to try. And so now I'm on all the caffeine. I am drinking a Nespresso decaf right now. But even more embarrassingly, I'm back on a Starbucks kick.
Oh.
I feel like I go through waves. I know it's bad coffee, but here's the thing. I'm in New York City. And my office is right by the Empire State Building, where they have a Starbucks Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone's not familiar, Starbucks Reserve, there's only a few of them in the country, and it's where Starbucks keeps the good coffee. It is way too expensive. It's very expensive, but I go there in the mornings before work and I write. I'm working on the novel for my band's next album. And I will get like a fancy coffee there, and it's so good. But I will. So the most ridiculous thing I've ordered there is, obviously Starbucks has the pumpkin spice latte. Well, at the Reserve, they have a nice pumpkin spice latte that is made with coffee aged in whiskey barrels, barrel aged coffee, and no shit, that latte is $16.
Oh man,
that is a $16 latte, but I did get it twice because it's fucking good. It's real fucking good. I can curse on this show, right?
Yes.
Okay. It's real good. Normally I get just like a normal cold brew and it's like $8. It's still insane, but like it's doable for like, I do this once a week. The Starbucks Reserve, but then because I'm going there and I'm getting all the points on my card, then on the other days I'm going to normal Starbucks so I can keep racking up that's how they get you, right? The loyalty card. It's the fucking trick. And now they've pulled me in. So now I'm getting just regular pumpkin cream cold brews, whatever. And I'm in the ecosystem again. I'll break out eventually. I always do. But every once in a while they get me.
And I don't coffee shame. It's fine. Like I'm a regular. I was at Starbucks earlier. Granted, I don't drink the coffee. I just get the chai lattes or whatever. Because
you like the chai? Okay.
I'm that basic bee who gets their whole milk chai latte, no water. So much so that my 4-year-old in the back, whenever I pull up, he repeats the order for me. But no, we're definitely in the ecosystem because now that I got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, it's also we're adding the cake pops to the order now.
Sure.
So those points are like, it's like, well, we can use the points to get the cake pops, even though they're like, $3 for.
They're crazy, for like 2 bites
for what 25 cents worth of cake.
But now they have for the holiday they have the sugar plum cheese Danish. That's good.
I'm a creature of habit. That the iced lemon loaf or whatever. Like, I don't care. Good. I know it comes prepackaged and whatever from wherever. I've had fancy iced lemon loaf. I've had homemade iced lemon loaf, which was really good. My wife made it for my birthday one year. But like that Starbucks one, for whatever reason, it just hits me right every single time. It's the right amount of everything on there. And, the one thing I do lament about Starbucks is like they like to get rid of the sandwiches that I do like there. Whenever I like a sandwich, they get rid of it. And it's really frustrating.
Like they got the spinach feta wrap. That's my go-to if I need to like have like a meal at Starbucks, which I try not to, but the spinach feta wrap. And then I like the Impossible breakfast sandwich. They got the Impossible sausage and I think it's like even vegan cheese on there.
And but honestly, if you have like a McDonald's across the street from there, you save yourself the money, get the Egg McMuffin from over there. But no,
or Dunkin'.
They used to have
I'll get a Dunkin' sandwich.
They used to have this like Chipotle chicken flatbread thing that like I was just hooked on that for the longest time. And I don't know. Again, I know it's terrible and it's too expensive and I probably wouldn't be able to afford it now, but just going as often as I did when I was working in the office, but it's just like, anyway, I don't coffee shame. Circling back. But especially as like you said, you're getting the fancier stuff. I mean, I understand getting the fancier coffee, and then sometimes you gotta slum it a little bit just to get the caffeine. And I will say my wife, she doesn't get the coffee there either, but occasionally she'll get like the iced Americano.
Oh yeah,
like iced is cool with her with that coffee, but like hot for me and her, like we're just like, no, we don't care for it.
I don't blame you, but they're also just everywhere here in New York. It's just convenient.
Yeah,
to know exactly where you're going to get.
Convenience goes a long way to making something worth it for sure.
As far as comics go, I'm going to hold off for a minute because I think Dylan and I have synchronized on this.
I did not get to synchronize with you on this. So.
Okay, never mind. I won't hold off.
Go on ahead.
For comics, I decided to keep things a little on topic for the podcast. It's, not only is our new season starting, but also Image has just started this line of Universal monster comics, starting with a Dracula series written by James Tynion IV and art by Martin Simmons. And this is legitimately like Universal Pictures. There's a whole title page on here that says Universal Pictures and Skybound present Dracula. So, and like James says in the afterword on here that this comic is based on the movie, like the 1931 movie based on the novel. So it's not a direct novel adaptation. It's him doing his riff on the 31 film. And I really loved it. I have not read a lot of James Tynion before. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his last name right. Do you know?
I think that's. I've heard Tynan. It's always
Tynan, because I think like Tiny Onion is kind of like the. I think it's like the name of his Substack or something. It's like Tiny Onion.
Oh, okay.
And it's supposed to be like.
That's funny.
How the pronunciation.
Right.
Tiny,
I haven't read a lot of his work. I have friends that know him, and he seems like a great guy.
I think I read that as a friend of a friend who is now writing Dracula for Universal. It means we can scratch him off the list of potential guests on our show. There's just no way it could be allowed to happen.
Sure, he could. We just have to figure out what he can talk about and what he can't. I mean, we could at least have him on, maybe not to pitch, but to talk about his comic and talk about Universal
All right, okay, well, let's table this. I was just going to do a one-off joke, but if this is going to become real shop talk, let's figure it out later.
Yeah. I would love to have James Tynion on. I hadn't read much of his work. I think I read maybe a DC book or two he did that I didn't love, but I'm not a huge DC person anyway. Yeah. And I know that he's really invested in his creator-owned work right now. And so I would love to check that out. But I loved this. It's only one issue so far. I think it's going to be a 4-issue miniseries. The art is just stunning. I mean, Martin Simmons, I hadn't seen any of his work before. Apparently he's done some of James's creator-owned stuff with him.
Okay.
It's painted, it's textured, it's I as someone who writes horror comics, I find horror in comics to be really hard to do because you're so disconnected from it. It's not like seeing a person on screen, or it's not even entirely the theater of the mind that like a novel is. You are seeing illustrations, and I feel like sometimes that can be difficult to get a scare out of someone, especially again with page layouts. You're seeing things ahead of time. You got to structure things around page turns, blah blah blah. But a huge part of that is the art being genuinely scary. And Don, you're really good at this, which is why I've had you come back to Monocle over and over. And Martin Simmons nails it. I mean, Dracula in this is terrifying. The way he draws Renfield is so unique. He has like this glowing white featureless face. Like his nose just disappears into the whiteness of everything, and these teeth that shine out. There's like bugs crawling over the pages that are painted on. It really, the atmosphere of it does not evoke the 1931 movie. Like I don't think, but it evokes the sort of same feeling maybe that you would get from it, but in a different medium.
Which I would argue is more important.
Oh,
yes,
for sure.
I think so as well. I think so as well. You don't want it. I didn't want to open this up and just have it be like, traced versions of Bela Lugosi or whatever, you just want it to inspire the same kind of feelings that movie would have done in 1931. And I think it's very effective at that. I'm really excited to see where it goes. I really, hey, Image Comics, I have a Universal podcast and I write horror comics. So if you need someone for maybe your Frankenstein adaptation, call it me and Don. Don and I have got a hell of a pitch for you. But
you have the pitch. I'll just do everything I can to make sure it looks good.
You're gonna draw that nasty ass Frankenstein that I got in mind.
Oh, I love to draw a nasty ass Frankenstein too.
I know you do.
I'll add a third book to my schedule. Sure, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, oh yeah, Don. Like you're gonna turn down an Image book right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, so I checked that out as a fan. Obviously, I've been watching nothing but Universal movies, Universal horror for like the last year and a half, and I loved it. I don't often get hooked by a lot of horror comics, but this hooked me, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. It's very Renfield focused. It's not structured like the movie. It opens after Dracula is already in London. After he's already, killed everyone on the Demeter, and it focuses on Renfield as sort of your like Dracula is barely in it in this first issue, just sort of like glimpses of him. But I like that. I like that it's sort of building up Dracula and teasing him so that when he finally makes maybe his grand entrance with Jonathan Harker or someone, it's going to have more of an impact. So,
Nice.
anyone out there that's Universal Monsters fans, check that out.
Awesome.
That's
Skybound's
what
really
I
going
got.
for those licenses. They're really shooting for that, which
Yes,
is great. I mean,
Skybound
they're
is.
putting serious talent behind it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that you got the Transformers and G.I. Joe licenses now, and they're
Right.
tossing, Daniel Warren Johnson on Transformers, which is like, it's a stupidly smart decision. Like,
Yeah, that's huge.
it's kind of nuts. So awesome. How about you, Dylan? I know you mentioned you're not really a coffee person, which surprises me. You being a relatively new parent, I'm so far.
I didn't say I didn't love caffeine. I'm just not a coffee guy. I love the smell of coffee. I'm just not a coffee drinker. I committed some sacrilege today by bringing some tea into the comics coffee metal.
I got tea right now too. I'm nursing. I think you and I are both getting over some sort of cold or something.
Yeah.
So
I'm just drinking some.
I got to do the tea right now. So
Twinings,
it's
lemon,
not blasphemy at all.
Yeah. But I don't know. I'm a tea drinker in general, although only until it's an hour where it's acceptable for me to start drinking Coca-Cola, and then too much of that. But my wife is a former barista and shift manager at Starbucks, so she knows all the secret menu shit.
Ooh,
Nice.
And I've sampled some goods, but I also never find that there's food at a Starbucks that I have any interest in eating, or if I do, it's gone the next time I'm there. So that's like we are a very easygoing, very accommodating of each other couple, and one of the only kind of like sort of irreconcilable conflicts that we'll end up with is if one of us just needs to dip in somewhere to get a bite. Like, we're waiting for a train transfer, like we're about to get like on the LIRR or something. She's like, I want to pop into Starbucks. I'm like, can we pop into anywhere but Starbucks? And she only wants to go to the Starbucks. So, but it's, that's marriage. Sometimes you just got to go to the Starbucks.
Was it a couple weeks ago? We ended up doing the thing where we all went, like all of us, including the kids, wanted something different to eat for dinner, and we literally drove to like 4 or 5 different places, and I even had to stop at a Menards to get the cola I wanted. I don't know if if you have Menards in New York. We
have Menards in Michigan. Yeah,
it's a hardware, it's big box hardware, but it's kind of like the one your grandpa would go to that somehow has grocery in there, and it's when you don't want to spend. It's like Menards, Home Depot, Lowe's in terms of how much you spend. But Menards, there's this cherry cola called Sprecher Cherry Cola. It's from Wisconsin, and for some reason, like whenever the stores are out of it, I know I could always find it at Menards. And it comes in a bottle. It's made with real sugar, and I was on a anti aspartame kick, trying to not have it for a while because. Various reasons, even though I'm
it's
back
bad
on it
for
now.
you. I get migraines from drinking aspartame.
Yeah, I'm a diet soda guy. Before coffee, it was literally like I was popping open Diet Pepsi at 8:00 in the morning. That was my coffee. And then
that's Dylan's game. Not diet, but sodas.
I love a morning soda. I try to control myself.
A lot of it came because of like a lot of my teen years, like I worked on a newspaper truck, so I would be out. I'd be waking up like at midnight, and I'd be like working till 6:00 in the morning or something. So like I'd be drinking soda that early because I've been drinking it all night or whatever. So I was kind of used to it. And then it got to a point where my wife was finally like, all right, I can't with you in the soda in the morning. Can you just do something else? And I'm like, fine. So, I like tea. So I was drinking tea. And then one day I just had a coffee from Dunkin' Donuts. And like, it was kind of one of those things where like everything is kind of aligned and like, oh, I guess I like coffee now.
The sun
like
shone
Dunkin'
through the
Donuts is a good-
clouds,
yeah.
illuminated you.
Dunkin's a good starter coffee, though. Like,
it is. It's a nice neutral coffee. And now we have our favorites. We have our we get a 5-pound bag from Rootless Coffee in Flint, Michigan.
Don, do you have Big where you are?
What's that?
Do you have Big B Coffee where you are?
Big B, I don't know.
Okay, it's a coffee chain that actually started in my hometown, but it's sort of taken over the Midwest, and that was my starter coffee.
If it's a coffee chain, I haven't seen it in our area.
Also, speaking of rare sodas, one I discovered recently that I can only find in Michigan, although for some reason they have it at Forest Hills Stadium here in New York. It's the only place I've ever seen in New York. Have either of you ever had Diet Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard of. I mean, I think I've had the non-diet Right brand soda.
I can't find it anywhere here in New York, but it has no caffeine and no sugar, but it tastes exactly like Diet Coke. Like, it is insane how much it tastes like Diet Coke, but without. So like, if ever I'm like, ooh, I'm craving like a Coke, but like I don't want to have any caffeine, it's too late or something, like a Diet Right is perfect. It tastes just like it, but can't find it anywhere except Forest Hills Stadium. I don't know what it is. It's weird, very weird.
Well, I live in Northern Illinois now. I grew up in Chicago, and we had RC and Diet RC. That was like the local trash cola.
Oh, I mean, you can get that in Jersey too. RC was like the discount one, which was like just as good. And it's, but I feel like that's what I remember Diet Right from too, like to be like sort of in that same category.
I remember having Diet Rights. I think my grandma probably had some for a while. But I haven't seen them in a long time. But I remember
they're hard to
drinking
find.
a Diet Right, and that's where my diet soda thing came from, because I would just like, I just started like drinking my grandma's soda because she lived in our basement apartment in my parents' house. And I was like, I like the flavor of this more. It's nothing about like, oh, it's better for me. It's like, I just like the flavor of it more.
It's good.
Yeah.
I got to be for a little bit of time. I became a nerd for like cane sugar sodas, especially root beers. And I would like seek out particular brands of root beer. And I would like be able to be like, see, this is like a wine drinker's soda, because you can talk about the relative vanilla to mint quality. Talk, oh, this one's earthy. Just it's a fetish, right?
I love, but I can get it with root beers though, because I love a good root beer, like a good cane sugar root beer. Yeah,
the root beer is my favorite soda, but I need the caffeine. So a lot of root beers don't have it. But I got into the habit of like, in addition to just not being really a coffee person, I didn't have a job that woke me up nearly as early as yours, Don, but I did grow up working at my family's record store, which is where I have all of my metal knowledge from. I'm not a metal listener, but I did work at Vintage Vinyl Records, which on the East Coast was like the metal mecca of that part of the country. And there were people who fly in from Europe to shop at our metal section. But we had, I think, a coffee machine. No, not even. People would bring coffee from Dunkin' Donuts, but I didn't like coffee. And if I needed caffeine at like 9 a.m. opening the store, we sold bottles of Coke. So I just cracked one of those open. And then when I finally left home and went to start working in an office, I was working at a startup doing like some kind of programming bullshit. And they did have coffee and they did have tea, but they also had was free Red Bull.
Oh boy.
And I thought it was so gross that the person who sat next to me every morning working would crack open a Red Bull at 9:30 every morning. But then I would start smelling it. And it became Pavlovian. Like I would hear the bottle crack open and I have to go get one. And then I would ultimately that would become my main source of sustenance for a period of time when I was temping at this place. And I was drinking 3 Red Bulls a day until I went to go see a doctor who told me that I had to stop or my prostate would stop working.
Yeah.
True story.
Too much.
I've had a Red Bull like 3 times in my life, and 3 times I've regretted it. It is just,
I've never had an energy drink ever.
it's one of those things to where like, yeah, it like I needed to be like alert or awake or whatever. I just needed that extra kick. But it's the same thing like the what is it, the Death Wish coffee. Like I tried one of the like iced coffee cans or whatever, and that was like the grossest shit I have ever drank in my entire. And I've accidentally drinking flat sodas that my mother put out her cigarette ashes in, and I would rather drink that than any of that iced whatever Death Wish coffee. And like, I'm sure the hot coffee's fine. I'm sure it's fine, but like just that particular.
I'm so sensitive to caffeine now. Now that I did decaf for so long, like I can really only have the 1 cup of coffee a day, or I go crazy.
Yeah. Some of that might also be age, though. Like, my tolerance for various chemicals has gotten much lower. I started seeing spots in my vision after having a beer last night. Like, granted, I'm underslept with a baby and I'm fighting a cold, but I was halfway into a beer and I was like, is the lighting in here fucked up? What's going on? And I was having the drummer of my band, No Jersey, is having a birthday, and I'm just taking him out for a beer. I'm like, what's happening? He's like, what's happening is that you're drunk now. So you never know.
No, yeah, I don't know if it's age or I had my gallbladder removed a few years ago. Mm-hmm. But like spicy foods now, like it's like my tolerance to eating them is fine. It's been whatever it's been. But like afterwards, the heartburn, like I've never had it before, but now it's just like, even like if like
that never happens to me.
Even if I have like foods too much. It's basically Tums and antacids is living in my closet now. My vitamin thing. I had to buy a bigger vitamin dispenser for all those crap I'm taking because I'm just getting old and beat up. And
we're getting old. I thought earlier this year that
it's not medications though. At least it's vitamins and like supplements and stuff to try to help. At least it's not medications, But I'm like taking like fish oil and like osteobiflex and extra vitamin D and all these other things.
Oh yeah, like, that would be embarrassing.
Yeah. It's just but also because I abuse the crap out of myself, so like all my joints and my backs hurt all the time. So I'm going to be the trying to course correct as much as possible before I'm just, the old guy just punched over and barely moving everywhere. So
it gets when you're a parent, like you've got 2 kids who are one of whom is I imagine out of the age where you're carrying them around a lot.
I wish. My 4-year-old, for some reason, like he's this past couple weeks, he's been like before and after school, he's like, carry me. I'm like, all right, fine. I guess I'll carry you or whatever. And then my 7-year-old, the problem is, about 2 years ago or about a year and a half ago, like I got more into like lifting weights than running and stuff. So I was always running for most of my adulthood for health or whatever. I just got more into lifting weights. So then I was like, really like, just like, daddy's throwing you around and stuff. And now they're used to that. So now it's like, oh, daddy can just lift me and toss me into my bunk bed now. And daddy, you can do this. And it's like, I can, but
you think in theory you just keep getting stronger because they keep getting heavier and just keep lifting. Eventually something's going to give. Like my son is like a week and a half shy of a year old. So he's still very little. And so I get to do like, one of the ways that I occupy him in an afternoon is like, okay, we're doing a workout, we're doing the baby squats, we're doing the baby curls.
Yeah.
He finds it very, and I feel like, yeah, that's great. If I just do this every day, I'll never die.
Yeah. I mean, if you keep up with it, I mean, you'll get the gains to keep up with them. Cause now my 7-year-old, she's in the 50-ish pound range. Mm-hmm. So, so she's like, oh, what'd she call it? I think because her mother said something like that, like, "Oh, daddy, let's get a pump," and it's just like,
get your pump on, yeah.
It's like, oh god, all right.
I don't know. It sounds exhausting, but also sounds like it generally just it's just that good dad shit.
I mean, I'm obviously mostly joking about how tiresome it is, but it's also good motivation to like at least keep at it, I guess.
Yeah,
to keep going. But
I've never been in better shape than I am just which tells you that I wasn't in great shape to begin with, but like cuz my son is still, like 18 pounds, but it's
I've never been in better shape either, and I don't even have a kid, so we're all doing great. I'll get there.
I've been in better
eventually.
shape, but I've been I haven't been as strong as I've been. I've been in like running multiple half marathons a year shape, and now it's like I was never skinny, but I was at least I had the cardio for that to be able to do that. But
I was your bargain bin.
Yeah.
Skin and bones comics nerd. You imagine that like obviously comics fans actually come in all shapes and sizes and colors and genders and whatnot, but you get the picture in your head of you have the big comics fan and you have the skinny comics fan, and I was the latter.
You've got your J and you got your Silent Bob.
Exactly. And I was a J, but I also wasn't smoking weed, so it's just lame. So and then I later on started like going to the gym and started getting in shape, and then COVID hit and I stopped going. But then I had a baby, so everything's cool. But pivoting back to comics, we were talking off the air about how currently just with the level of like investment it takes to keep up with comics, my only input right now is catching up on stuff in the Marvel Unlimited app. But the upside of that is that I am, a year or so behind reading the entire Krakoa era X-Men line.
Yeah.
Every single title, every single book. And
which I think is what I talked about last time I was on this podcast was Krakoa.
Yeah, probably.
I think I might have mentioned
and Dalton gets the Dawn of X trades with every single title.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to feel like I've always loved X-Men, but as I understand it, this as I listen to like Cerebro and stuff now, which Dalton turned me on to, that this is really the first time in like my lifetime that the entire X-Men line has been hot and exciting and interesting to read, bearing in mind that I'm about to get to the point where Marauders stops being good.
So I'm so
I
sorry.
know I'm relishing the rest of the Reign of X, Reign of 10, whatever era, because I know that once we get to Destiny, things start to get a little wobbly.
Things will get a little wobbly, yeah.
But that's the fun thing also of being, behind. It's like I get some stuff spoiled for me, but I also get to temper my expectations. And I don't have to do the thing that comics fans often do, especially in the world of Big Two, which is like overreact to everything that happens in part 2 of a 6-part story as if this isn't a commercial break. It's like if you're like, oh my God, somebody just drove that car off the cliff. It's the end of the fucking. Was like, no, we'll be back in 90 seconds. And you will see that they actually jump out of the car. I don't have to be part of that tiresome discourse, which I'm sure as a comics creator can drive you up the wall. Where it seems like people kind of forget how the medium works sometimes when they have a month to kill between issues most of the time. And during that time, if you're really into it and obsessed, what else can you do but like work yourself up?
Yeah. Now if I go to a con, I'm tabling, but when I was going to cons just as a fan and like going to panels, I had to stop going to panels because I was just getting annoyed at fellow fans because they would literally be like, so what's going to happen at the end of the story that you're telling right now? Like, fucking wait, man. Like, I don't think Bendis is going to be telling you what's going to be happening at the end of the series, 4 issues before it ends. Like, what? I just this is like just fucking wait. You've mentioned
more of a comment than a question, but
yeah, exactly. It's more of a 3-part question, and it's like 6 questions. But and it's just like, but you mentioned like X-Men, and that's one of the things that's kind of like trying to draw me back a bit is just hearing how good the Krakoa era stuff was when in its heyday. What was, you guys are younger than I. What was your like introduction to X-Men? Since we're kind of talking about that.
Well, like everybody else who was born in the late 80s or early 90s, obviously I was like bombarded with the 90s classic X-Men series, but but for me it was more than that, because I was a Batman animated series guy, and for a period of time I was like a weird DC loyalist in a way that I think you can only be when you're a teenager or we'll say a teen at heart, which is not complimentary. But I really liked X-Men Evolution. That was the one that really got me like really stoked about X-Men, because I liked first of all, I liked that it felt, whether or not it was true, it felt as if the production value was smoother. I always felt like the Marvel Entertainment brand cartoons like X-Men, Spider-Man were always trying to pack in a crazy amount per episode, which what I didn't realize at the time is they were essentially picking a stack of like an issue or a stack of issues and saying, we're going to translate these stories into this 22-minute episode of cartoon. And they weren't writing them like, it didn't often feel like I was watching a TV show the way it did when I was watching BTAS. X-Men Evolution, in addition to being on Kids WB, which was like where I was getting my superhero stuff for the most part on Saturday mornings, it felt more like I'm watching what I did not really realize at the time was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but through the prism of the X-Men, and also obviously the Bryan Singer movies. He's Poison now, but he's from my hometown, so at the time, now we also have Chris McQuarrie, so we'll take that. But at the time, it was like a big deal. It's like, yo, this guy went to our high school and now he's making the X-Men. So those were big. But the comics that I was reading at the time, I didn't get Grant Morrison when Grant Morrison's X-Men was coming out. It was too weird for me. I was stuck on the idea. My friend and I, who used to talk about comics with, we would get annoyed being like, he put Wolverine through the sun and he comes out the other side. That's stupid, man. That destroys the whole. Where's the stakes? And like, I felt the same way about Morrison's Batman when it started, because I was like a Greg Rucka Batman guy, and I really liked the gritty detective stuff, and I wasn't into the whole cosmic Batman Zur-En-Arrh thing or whatever at all. Now I love Grant Morrison's X-Men, and I love Grant Morrison's Batman. But I do think that maybe being attached to the more grounded animated series and the more grounded movie adaptations was maybe creating an almost anti-comics attitude for a comics reader, where so that was a very long answer to your question.
No, it's perfect. It was perfect though, because I come from the 92 X-Men, like I started reading X-Men comics probably like just after like Jim Lee and all them formed Image. Like I think I remember starting to buy Image comics like a year after they all hit. So like I couldn't really go back and like buy the first issues or I remember my brother like obsessively trying to get the 5-part Jim Lee cover variants and things like that. And, having a brother, we kind of like split up our purchases. So I got like Wolverine and X-Force, and then he got, X-Men and Uncanny X-Men. And then we would just swap and read or whatever. But, I just kind of, I like to ask people, X-Men fans, like what was your era? Because, I know so many people like me who that's our era. And like, I think Age of Apocalypse was like our peak. And you couldn't get Age of Apocalypse now because everyone's going to be like, oh, they're going to, like we didn't know. Like I was in
They keep trying to make it.
I was in grade school and I'm like, wait, what's happening to the X titles? And like, you didn't know, you got your news from Wizard, you didn't get any other information. And in retrospect, I was like, well, yeah, duh, they're going to bring back the original titles or whatever. But you're like, what is this thing? And now it's just like, it felt like after that, it was like a decline. And like you, I didn't get the Morrison stuff. Like I love Morrison, like Grant Morrison got me back in the comics with We 3. Like, I was off of comics for almost 10 years. And then I read I just on a whim, based on some recommendations, I picked up We 3 and I'm like, I'm back in, baby. This is comics, And, but yeah, I get it. Because, Grant Morrison, it feels like he starts off everything with like how fucking weird can we make this? But he does it with like such like,
it's like issue 3 that he destroys Genosha.
Yeah,
right on. I mean, I do the thing where Grant uses they them now, But it's
I'm sorry,
you're right.
yeah,
That's right.
I forgot
honestly.
that too.
But I mean, but at the same time, like there are contexts like I loved Morrison's JLA, like from the start. Like that felt like that made sense. And that was one of like that was an early formative comic for me. And yet when you put it into other contexts, like looking back now, I'll be like, oh no, that was like Grant like at like a 2.
Mm-hmm.
Like occasionally hopping, and then whenever things got too weird, you had like a Mark Waid fill in that just kind of brought everything back to like no, this world is real. But it's I don't know. It's interesting that like now, as an adult, I try to be patient when I see like when we talk about those hyperbolic reactions to things happening in comics, like the idea that like everything. Even like when we were young, they were taking big risks. Like they hadn't, like we were kids when they killed Superman. We didn't know they were going to unkill Superman, even though they knew from the beginning they were going to do it.
Yeah.
And then later to find out that it was just to kill time so that the wedding could happen at the same time on TV as it happened in the comics is really funny. But like now I do have to be like, oh, okay, you know what? When you're 14 and you're reading comics, you don't necessarily, even if you have the online tools, you're not necessarily keyed in with the rhythm of how this stuff always cycles back around. It's still real to you, damn it, for a little while longer. So but when something happens like the Krakoa era, where it really does feel like everything else that has happened in the X-Men, that was a whole other era that's over now, and we're not going back. And I know that now they're talking about this at the end of that, but it doesn't feel like the end of that is necessarily going to mean going right back to where everything was before. It feels like something new would have to happen, which I'm sure will be dictated by whatever shape the Disney X-Men movies are going to take. But it's interesting to look back and realize that like this stuff was cyclical before we got there to an extent. The cycles have gotten much, much faster, right?
Yes.
But the idea that like, oh, it's weird that Tim Drake is not like the Robin anymore. It's like, no, well, yeah, man, but people who were reading 10 years before you were like, oh no, Jason Todd was Robin when I started reading, and the people before that was like Dick Grayson. You are meant to outgrow it, and then if you go back into it, you have to be willing to say like, when it comes to big two stuff, obviously comics is huge. It's all kinds of things. But like when it comes to big stuff, be like, okay, this is going to be somebody else's version now. And I got to be cool. I got to be cool with it being like, it might be the same thing that I already read. And I'll be like, they did this already. It's like, yeah, but this isn't for you. This is for them.
Yeah.
Or it might be totally different. Be like, it's not like what I remember. It's like, well, you can't have it both ways. And also, not for you.
Yeah.
You get to play in the sandbox if you want.
Exactly. And that even stretches to other things like I think a kind of a topic that's been discussed on at least on my show for a bit is the new Ninja Turtles. Like I love Mutant Mayhem. I absolutely
me too.
I also fully recognize like, a lot of those characters introduced into there are not the same version. That's fine. And I'm not talking about the people who are upset about the ethnicity of April or whatever. Or her appearance. I'm talking about the people who like, there are people who are legitimately upset that Leatherhead wasn't a giant Cajun sounding, alligator. I'm like, you have that already though. Like this isn't for you.
Exactly.
I get that you
especially now when you can. Paramount Plus proudly boasts that they have every Turtles show. No one's taken that from you. If you want to watch the old one, or if you want to show your kids the old one, it's all right there.
It's all there, and it's fine. That's not us. Like. And it's just it is that thing, and unfortunately, as we know, people can't let go of the fact that this is not for you anymore. And I think one of the joys I've actually had in reading more independent comics is like knowing, X-Men and stuff that's not for me anymore. But I'm finding all these other stories that I never thought would be for me, and they are, and enjoying those so much more. And I was the red bins in the back here. I was kind of talking about it before the show. These are my comics from when I was growing up or when I was collecting, more heavily in the early 2010s. And I'm going through these things and I'm seeing some of these cycles come through. Like I found my whole run of Wolverine and the X-Men. I'm like, oh, when Wolverine was running the Jean Grey school for gifted youngsters, or like X-Men Utopia when they had their island again of just them, and things like that. And I'm trying to find like, I was trying to think of what am I purging, what am I keeping? I'm like, what's none of this stuff. Only a few of these things really felt like the X-Men I knew that was endeared to me. And that's fine. They didn't have to be for me, but like, if it's not for me, like, it's fine. I'll just move on. Like, I think the last thing that really felt like for me was this is a long time ago, the Messiah Complex series crossover they had. That felt like Executioner's Song and Fatal Attractions and all those crossovers. And that was still like 10, 12 years ago at this point. So I'm excited to check out the Krakoa stuff though, because too many people whose opinions I trust have said it's really good. So, and I haven't ever been disappointed by Hickman's work or anything like that. So
yeah,
I'm down to give it a shot. But thanks for indulging the X talk. On all this and that. But so I don't want to keep you too long. I know it's much later over there than it is over here. So Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe? Phase 3 has officially started. You have a episode.
It's kicked off.
Yeah.
With Peter Jackson talking about Colossus, the old movie from the 70s, which I was unaware of. It was a great episode, though.
We were both unaware of it as well.
Yeah, and now we're Forbin pilled.
And I saw on Instagram, someone bought like the Blu-ray of it because of our episode.
Really?
I think it's still in print in Europe or something. So
that's cool.
I
got a text from my sister
Colossus
saying that she and her husband just found it on Vimeo and started watching it. So
Universal owes us some money for that Blu-ray sale.
Yeah.
And in a fun fashion, you announced your slate of Dark Universe Phase 3 movies, and my obvious ties aside, I am very excited for the Van Helsing one because I have my own female Van Helsing comic.
You do, yeah,
which is very different from it's obviously different from your take, but I'm because I really liked her appearance in Dracula Lives as kind of being this unhinged, like, all monsters must die type person. So I think I'm probably either most excited for that one just because it is the one thing like, oh, this is kind of the different one. Like, I don't know what to expect out of this one yet.
I have some big plans for that one. Some very big plans.
And then I'm also looking forward to Dylan, your Mummy movie. Because of
which might be out by the time this comes out. I don't know what date this is set to air.
This will be coming out next Monday, I believe.
Okay, so it'll be out this upcoming Sunday then. So yeah, The Mummy Heaven's Gate, which is our third Mummy movie and the first official like
canon Phase 3
canon episode of
like
Phase 3.
2.5 hours long, and
so now's the time to jump on if you're hearing this because Phase 3 really kicks off like full steam ahead on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm excited because you're both exchanging previous characters. You've kind of had that ownership of the movie on, so I'm interested to see. And based Dylan on what you said in this previous episode with Gita on your kind of ideas for the Mummy in terms of directors and all that, I'm really interested to see what that's gonna look like. So I'm definitely, and also the Black Lagoon sequel. I'm excited for that as well.
That's going to be a challenge because
especially all of them,
such
of course,
Dalton's baby.
Yeah, it's.
And I got to write a fucking musical.
No one's making you do this except for now. You really do have to.
Yeah,
the fans are.
You've thrown your hat over the wall.
The fans would riot if I wrote a Phantom sequel that wasn't a musical.
I, the one who said they were not the fan of the musicals, am now officially demanding that it is a musical.
See, people are demanding it. I got to do it.
I'm pretty sure I tagged you on Twitter or BlueSky or one of the places, but like, you need any chugga chuggas guitars in your, just give me a call.
You're the chugga chugga king.
But in all seriousness, I'm excited for this whole slate of stuff. Everyone, it's just such an entertaining podcast. You can't.
Thank you.
Even if you think you're not going to I'm not really a fan of Frankenstein or whatever, like you're going to dig it. It is really just the passion you two have for telling the stories and all that is very infectious. And
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Backing that up with quality takes on these characters and just the way the universe is coming together and all that. It really is. And I really enjoy the casting notes you all have. Like with the Wolfman. Why am I forgetting the young man's name? What's that?
Mason Gooding?
Yes. Yeah. I knew his face, but like I didn't know him. And we recently watched all this recent Scream movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I was watching
charming
on the screen. And I'm like, I have to look up who did his voice on the podcast because they did a damn good job of copying this guy's voice.
Oh, I'll pass that on.
Hey, shout out Julian Ames.
Julian Ames, the aforementioned drummer from No Jersey, was also the voice of our Wolfman.
Like they did a great job. Like just because once he started speaking in the movie, I'm like, oh wait, yes, that's right. And then so there you go. And again, I love the end of phase movies where you do essentially the audio play and do all that fun
stuff. We do a 2-part audio play.
Those are so much fun.
A full cast and a full screenplay, and it's so much work. And we're doing 3 of them this phase.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, we're doing the holiday special, which we're writing right
next month. We're gonna have the Dark Universe holiday special, which will be fully acted by a voice cast. So,
which again, like it, I could just throw a dart at any of the things you all have announced. I'm like, yeah, I can't wait to hear that. It's gonna be exciting. So
we only want to announce things that people are going to be excited about. So I think we're always aiming for big ideas and new stuff that hasn't been done before.
Awesome. Well,
even though this is mostly all sequels for this phase.
Dalton, Dylan, thank you so much for your time. I don't want to keep you any longer.
Thank you,
everyone. Please go check out Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe? Dylan, Dalton, let everyone know where they can find you and the show online.
So you can find us on any podcatcher. Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe is the name of the show. You can find us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and BlueSky at Dark Pod. Hell, you can email us at darkuniversepod@gmail.com. I'm Dalton Deschain everywhere. DaltonDeschain. And Dylan is Dylan Roth everywhere, except Instagram because you don't really use it.
No, but I'm Dylan Roth on Twitter and BlueSky. That's spelled Dylan like Bob, Roth like David Lee. You can find my band No Jersey on various streaming platforms. That's at No Jersey, no problem, wherever you at things.
Oh, and I've written a bunch of comics with Don. I have a horror comic series called Monocle that's like Tales from the Crypt set in Silicon Valley. Don has done a number of stories and some covers and stuff. And you can find all that at monocle.com or spooky.zone. Just type in spooky.zone into your browser and you'll get to my Patreon. And I sell the floppies on my Bandcamp. So,
and I am so sorry. I almost forgot. We did have a question from Twitter from fellow artist and Monocle artist, I believe, Pete Collins.
Yes. Did an amazing Monocle story.
All around great dude. He wants to know where the B-52 homage stuff from.
Honestly, it was just like this podcast, a joke idea I had one time that then ended up following through on. It was just, I think, because I figured out I could do the Fred Schneider voice pretty well. I think I was just fucking around with some friends, and the first song that occurred to me was like, what if we did Old Town Road? Because that was like the big song at the time. That was huge in 2019. And it was just like, oh, what if I was just like, I got the horses in the back, and I was like just doing that with some friends to fuck around. And I was like, what if I made a band and we covered all like pop songs, like in the style, like that's such a, and then I was like, okay, I have to do this. and it just spiraled out of control from there, as my ideas often do. But it's really just, oh, I can do the Fred voice. Isn't it funny when I do this little Nas X song like that? And
yeah,
here we are 5 years later somehow.
Awesome. And you have a new EP and all that coming out very soon.
New EP will be out in December with 3 or 4, depending on how many I finish, B69 songs. The tentative title for the EP, I'll announce that here as well, is 1979 Fred's version.
Nice.
Oh.
Off clap. All right.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, both of you, thanks again so much. I'll make sure there's links to everything in the show notes below. All right, everyone, go check it out.
Thank you, Don. It was a pleasure being on here.